You are listening to Insight, the University of St Andrew's Physics Society's podcast. Join us as we journey into the world of St Andrew's academics, discovering their passions, inspirations and motivations. Hi everyone, welcome to an interview with Dr Bernd Braunecker, who works at the University of St Andrew's Physics and Astronomy Department. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks.
So we normally sort of start off by discussing what our interview's positions and path into those positions at St Andrews are. So I guess what positions in the department do you hold and how did you get to St Andrews?
Well, I'm a lecturer here in theoretical physics, and I think the main part how you get a position is you get a job somewhere, and there you end up in the place where they offer you a job, and that's how I ended up in St Andrews.
So where did you work before previously?
Before that, I was in Spain, in Madrid, which was just one place of many places before. So I traveled around from actually doing my PhD in Switzerland, going to the US, coming back to Switzerland, going back to Spain, and then finally coming here. And
were you always working in the same sort of field, or have you shifted?
It was always condensed matter physics. It shifted a little bit fields, so between several, say, the subsections. And so I never can tell you really what I'm working on. It's always shifting a little bit to the left and the right.
Yeah, it looked when I was looking at the work of your group online, it looked like it was quantum materials.
Yeah, it always has to do with quantum, and had always to do something with interactions. But then you have the side that goes more towards quantum computing. You have the side that goes more towards the sort of traditional electron interactions. But I think what's most interesting is when you bring sort of both sides together and ask what's an interface between two different systems, what is it doing? And how does it, with interactions, modify the physics? And then as next step, how can we actually, when we understand the physics, how can we twist somehow the conditions such that the physics does what we want to do? And this is pointing towards this quantum information processing computing thing.
Yeah, I saw that it was on the page. It was talking about shifting from understanding materials to beginning to design materials. And so one thing I was curious was, to what extent sort of are we able to design materials?
Yeah, I think this is a change we have seen in all this field in quantum physics, that for the, say, first 100 years, we were very happy with trying to understand what a material is. Well, we have a material, and then we want to understand what's going on. But now somehow the demands have shifted that we actually want to use quantum to make actually computations and processing. So can we use this knowledge now that we have acquired over the 100 years and sort of twist it around and say, if I want to have that and that property, what actually does my material need to fulfill, and how can I design a material to go there?
Okay, what kind of properties are we able to?
It's if you want to do a theory for quantum computing, what you need to do is to have a well-defined quantum state that you sort of keep in a well-prepared superposition of your initial states plus some entanglement with whatever, and you want to keep it as long as you want, and you want to, when you want to manipulate it, you want to do it in a way that is deterministic. And that's sort of the stuff that doesn't work with a quantum state, because it always interacts with environment, it always runs away immediately. We call this decoherence. So what we want to do then is to isolate it as well as possible from the rest of the world. But when we isolate it, we can't manipulate it. And the moment we manipulate it, we make it dirty and noisy again. So it's a sort of stuff that really doesn't work. And you need to find sort of a compromise between keeping it and isolating it and trying to manipulate it. Manipulate in the sense that I want to take this, let it interact with some external fields, and then it makes some, say, rotation or change in entanglement that I can use then to make a quantum algorithm, for instance.
Very interesting. Okay, so yeah, it's about limiting the impact of the environment on it until you want it to have an impact, I guess.
Yeah, and the environment usually is considered as something quite bad.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to figure out is whether we can actually use this bad and make something good out of it. And that's a part of the research we're doing.
I see. So yeah, because it looked like the at least within your group there seemed like quite a broad. Obviously, it was all on the same topic. Quite a broad number of things that you guys were working on.
Yeah, and this is one aspect of trying to understand how a system interacts with its environment, and then how the environment actually feeds back on the system, and whether out of this feedback one can actually get some interesting physics. Whereas in the, say, what I just described before is the interaction with the environment is really bad. It just destroys your state, and you never get it back. We're trying to figure out at really short time scales, at least there's some quantum coherence between them. Can we actually get some information back, or can we use the information there to actually actively cancel noise cancellation on the environment or something like that? And we have no idea actually, but we're working towards it.
Interesting. So is this work mainly theoretical or is it experimental?
This is purely theoretical.
Okay. But
we're trying to put in always realistic systems and parameters, and such that we don't say do something which no one is interested in.
How do you find that, the sort of dealing with the boundary of doing theoretical work but always trying to think about the realistic situations?
Well, I think the first thing is you need to put in numbers. So you need to get good numbers from experimentalists or from the papers. Best is always to talk to someone and they give you some idea of what the numbers are. Numbers would mean typically temperatures, energy scales, compare them with each other. How strong is a coupling from system A to system B? So it could be a magnetic coupling, could be a charge something. And then you try to put them in and make some sort of, if I twist it a bit to the left and the right, and within some limits, what can I get out of there?
Yeah, that sounds certainly like fascinating work. One of the points of the podcast is learning about the academics themselves. So what particularly was it about this type of work that really appealed to you when you were going into physics, and I guess why do you find it interesting to this day?
Well, I think it's about how you grow into it.
Yeah.
So as a student, you essentially sample what is offered locally. So you have to choose your master project and the PhD project, and then essentially you have this knowledge of who is actually in your university to whom you can talk, and then you end up in some corner. Out of this corner, of course, the moment you start working on something, or the moment you start working on anything, it becomes interesting, and then you have the possibility of shaping it yourself. And once you're done with that, say with a PhD, you have to choose what you want to do next. And there are two options you can make. One is the topic, the other one is a person. So with whom do you want to work, or on what topic do you want to work? Then, well, it has a third part, which is actually the one covering everything, is who is giving you a job. And so the first two options essentially are deciding on where you apply, and then out of all those things, someone will offer you a job. Go there, you change a little bit your orientation, or you continue, but it always, let's say you have a framework, and within the framework you choose your path. If you continue with that, you choose a path that makes your life interesting, and it gives you also the opportunity of continuing then. So it's a random walk directed by your interests. And this is how you essentially you end up with some specific research topic or field of research. It's absolutely not predictable.
Yeah, have you found that one choosing the topic versus choosing the person has appealed to you more throughout?
I think I've optimized mostly with what would be an interesting research group to be.
Okay.
But then you have also constraints. So at some point you have a family that sort of needs to be kept together. So for instance, I moved to Spain was because my wife is an astrophysicist. So she was in Germany, I was in Switzerland. We had 2 children. She got a job in Spain. So I went to the university in Spain and knocked at the doors and asked, do you have a job? And so this was place and person related. But of course, I from the topic I chose on which doors I was knocking.
What prompted the move to St Andrew then? Was there anything particular?
Well, I got a job.
Okay.
And she got also a job later then. So she's in Dundee now.
Ah, perfect. Very handy. So, well, I guess this kind of just talking about your move to St Andrews. Is there anything you found about the sort of academic environment at St Andrews that's perhaps unique or individual compared to other places or countries you've worked in?
I think what is pretty unique here is that we are small and we are, let me phrase it like this. We are small and we have to be good to survive and on the field. So which means there's a sort of friendly competition with a small group of very, very good colleagues. And this makes it quite unique because everyone knows everyone. We know what everyone is doing and we have a lot of support mutually and a sort of mutual stimulation. And I think that's a quite unique place, the St Andrew.
Have you found that the teaching's been different place to place as well?
The teaching is also different. We are quite intensely teaching here. Other places are more relaxed about it. Relaxed in the sense of not providing so much of a quality. But of course it demands much more time here from the teaching side. Yeah.
Is that at what point did you start teaching? Is this when you did PhD or later on?
Well, as a PhD or with tutoring.
Yeah.
After that, depending on which position I had, I was allowed or not allowed to teach. When I was allowed to teach, I just chose it, and it's nice to first transmit what you know. Second is when you have a module and you teach it for the third time, finally you start understanding it yourself.
I see. Yeah.
So I think it takes about 3 times until you're really safe and you can actually use it much more freely than you had before. So it gives you quite a number of advantages. And but of course, after a few years, you need to switch to something else.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that I was very keen to ask that ties into this, I think, quite well is I think it's always fascinating asking teachers what makes both a good teacher and a good student. And so I was interested to hear your perspective on that. What makes a good teacher and what makes a good student?
That's a mean question. It's let me start with a good student. A good student is someone who is asking you the ugly and mean questions. And which just tells that they are thinking about it and then they want to understand. Of course, that may be quite tricky sometimes because especially if you have very fast progression in a module, it's very hard to keep the pacing as a student. And so it's very easy to be disconnected at some point, and once you're disconnected, you don't really feel like you're ready to ask. My suggestion is ask anyway, because first it gives feedback to the teacher that it may go too fast or something hasn't been explained correctly. But the other part is where you really learn, and I think this is the good teacher aspect, is where you really learn is not from the core topic itself, but from the side remarks of the lecturer.
I see.
And because then you try to make cross-links, and all of a sudden there's just one sentence that makes something clear, which you have been wondering about, which is not written in a book, which is not written on the script or something. And so if, let's say, I as a student profited mostly from that. So now as a lecturer, what I'm trying to do is to be extremely chatty.
I see.
It may be a bit too much sometimes, but not just to give you the core information, but just to make a link to the left and right and tell this appears here, this comes here. Also, quite a lot of those material we're teaching is actually pretty old. Now you have to go through all the mechanics. So you start from Newton. You have to go through lots of things from the 19th century, and before you actually can enter the stuff that brings you to 20th century, but still quantum mechanics is 100 years old. Where and what of those things is actually important for modern research and modern technology and so. I was missing this quite a bit as a student, so what I'm trying now to do is essentially always to make a link to why we're using it nowadays. I think it may be sometimes a little bit too much, but if you maintain 20% of what I'm saying, I'm very happy. I think that's the main part. Is it gives you too much information, but at some point you're getting used to it. And I think the understanding comes after getting used to it.
Yeah. Do you find it kind of hard to sort of battle with just from, I guess, personal interest level, having to go back and look at things that sort of, I guess you probably covered quite a lot, especially if you've taught module many times, versus dealing with the battle between that and the sort of current research you're doing, which I'm sure, is fascinating on a day-to-day basis. So do you find it's nice to have that balance of flipping back and forth, or do you find it difficult to
It depends. So let's say the disadvantage of teaching is that it has to occur at a specific timetable where you may be very excited about something else. The advantage of teaching is that it forces you to be in a very strict timetable, such that you don't run away and get lost in the clouds and outer space.
I see.
So let's say it keeps you a bit grounded, but there are these very intense teaching times where you don't have time for anything else. That's quite tough sometimes.
Yeah. So that'd be maybe an interesting thing to discuss, which is sort of what would you say your day-to-day looks like? So what you do during the day?
It depends how much teaching is, because the teaching, as I just said, is giving you this very rigid frame of you have to show up in class at a certain time.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be late, or you shouldn't be too early either. So when you have a lot of teaching, then if there's a scattered teaching schedule, I think this is very, very hard, because you go in, you do something, and then you have only a short break where you can't really start doing something else, and then you go back to the next lecture. This is a structure of a day where you essentially fill the holes and the gaps with sort of routine tasks. So if you have something to mark, then you mark it during that time. If you have days where you have more freedom, then it depends quite a bit of what is the current research topic. So if one of my PhD students has something, say, exciting, complicated, and we want to write up some publication, for instance, then you just reserve a lot of time just to work on those topics. If there is something sort of intermediate, then you try to figure out what is actually something new we can do. You go around and try to explore a little bit with the literature and the new environment. So the daily schedule is essentially governed by some boundary conditions, and within those boundary conditions you try to essentially to figure out what is the best research or teaching activity you can do there. Since it's theoretical physics, it's say office-based. There's not much of a machine that can break. So it's to overcome some either analytic or computational issues or challenges, and then try to analyze actually what comes out of those. A lot still is pencil paper.
Do you find it's difficult to stop thinking of the things when you go home? Is it like maintaining work-life balance? How do you find that as a theoretical physicist?
You can work wherever you want, so quite a bit of work is still done at home.
Sure. The
thing is, the moment the children are awake, while it used to be quite intense in a few years ago when they were pretty small, now they're growing all up. It's nice. But essentially, when I'm home and everyone is there, there's not just I'm forced to disconnect, because otherwise it just doesn't work. What we started doing actually is when all the children have been in babies is to get up quite early in the morning, and then you have a few hours in the morning just of quietness, and you can some decent work. Yeah, so essentially afternoon, evening is not much going on, and most of the things are shifted to the morning hours.
Interesting. Okay. So,
but work family balance is everyday chaos. It's never quiet. It's always, well, sometimes you miss it, sometimes you don't.
For sure.
It's every day is a bit different. There's not much of a routine there.
Interesting. Do you what would you say is something that the thing you like most about working in the industry you work in?
You mean working at a university compared with working any other job?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, as an academic.
As an academic.
Or if it's a student specifically.
Well, I think academic probably generally. I define myself what I want to do.
Yeah.
It's probably it's not the stuff that everyone wants or can do, but I think when you end up in an academic position, it is the type of work you actually like doing. So find your own interesting questions and try to solve them.
I definitely think that's a good thing to say. Is there anything you would perhaps change about academic work and the way it sort of is run?
Well, there's it's always the balance between how much do you have to do with teaching and how much do you have not to do with teaching. So, sometimes the balance is towards one side and not towards the other side, and there are periods where this is pretty demanding, and which then also means that you extending your day time, well, mostly the morning time for me, into quite a bit of intense working patterns. That, with the years, becomes tougher and tougher. But I don't see any way of changing that. So it's not the optimal thing, but I don't know what would be needed to be done to actually change that. But let's say it's sometimes this is the tiring part.
I see.
Otherwise, just to have the freedom of working on whatever problem you want to do, it compensates quite a lot for the extra boundary conditions.
Have you found that, because you're in charge of a research group now at St Andrews, have you found that's changed your ability to do that? How much impact would you say that's had on being able to work on the things you want to work on?
It's having a research group gives you an advantage that you can actually outsource some of the work. It's one of the parts that probably everyone starting a research group underestimates is how much time it takes actually to train your group members.
I see.
So for a PhD, it takes typically a year and a half until they're really up to speed and running. This is well, it depends on the person.
Yeah.
But it's a quite a time where you may have new ideas, but you can't really fulfill them yet because or you can't delegate them yet for full beauty because there's still a lot of how to say techniques and methodology to learn from new group members. And then of course once they're really full up and productive and have all the expertise and know everything perfectly well, they finish the PhD and they leave. So but well, how to say, that's the game we play anyway, but and it is very good because that's the goal of having actually a PhD. It's a sort of time delay mostly for some ideas. So if you have, well, after many years of experience, you can often just sit down and do something. But if you don't have those many years of experience, you need to sit down, learn the basics, and a few weeks or a few months later, you can start with that. So there's a time delay always in there. And so I think that's the difference when you work just for your own, as a, say, postdoc, or you actually have a research group in which the tasks are distributed. But there's always a time lag in there.
So for as someone who's both been a PhD and a postdoc and also now has a research group, do you have advice for people who are maybe doing a PhD, advice for them going into a research group and how to sort of be the most productive as soon as they can or deal with that environment?
Well, if you're a new PhD and you want to start in a research, well, let's say first choose the research group on the topic you're most interested in. What you should then look for is a good environment. So there are typically other group members around. So profit from discussing everything with them. And the other part is to be as open as possible to, say, admit that there's a lot of things to learn and ask. And I think when you do that, then it's the best start you can have. Yeah, don't hesitate to ask actually what would be the best way of doing something, if someone else has actually knowledge about it. And the moment this is sort of going all directions with the communication, then it's one of the best preparations, and second is also one of the, say, psychologically best situations, because otherwise, when it doesn't work and you have no idea what's going on, there's always a sort of level of frustration coming in. And a PhD brings you always to a limit. And let's say if it doesn't bring you to the limits, then it's not correctly done.
See.
But if it brings you to the limits, of course, it has a huge potential of being extremely frustrating. And in that case, it's really necessary to talk to everyone. First, other PhD students have experienced exactly the same thing. And second is your supervisor actually should give you a hand there and help you and give you the necessary extra information or the how to say, the small push that brings you out of your hole. I think my recommendation is just to ask, to communicate, and when it doesn't work, ask again.
Great advice. Now maybe moving slightly away from the world of academia and research. It sounds like you've got a very busy schedule, but I was wondering, do you have any time for hobbies perhaps, or sport or things like that outside of your work and family life?
Yeah, it's a lot of music.
Music, okay.
So we have, I don't know, 20, 30 music instruments at home.
Oh wow.
They're mostly playing piano. So that's this sort of good distraction and good balance with everything else that comes in.
Do you play all the instruments, or?
Yeah, I play. Well, let's say one is playing, the other one is trying to play.
Yeah.
I sort of went into a habit of when I was traveling far, I tried to bring back a music instrument. And that's, yeah, this has led to some quite interesting acquirements. So I got a sort of pear-shaped guitar from Taiwan, and I got also a long string instrument from Uzbekistan, a dutar. And that's quite interesting to buy those, and second is just then at home to try to get some decent sound out of them.
Do you sort of figure it out as you go along, or how
yeah,
do you
luckily there's also YouTube where people know how to play, but it's quite often just to have a bit of pleasure, just trying to figure out how things are going.
What is it in particular that you enjoy about, I guess, learning to play all these different instruments? Is it relaxing? Is it just stimulating?
I think it's mostly curiosity.
Okay.
And it's also, if you try to make some music, it's to try to learn how some specific instrument reacts. It's a quite interesting experience, and I want to say development of figuring out how things are going.
Yeah, it's very cool.
And every instrument has its different sounds. So even say if you have a piano and a different piano, two pianos are different. So in principle, when you start trying to make some music on one of them, you can't just transmit the way you play one piano to the next piano. So it's quite interesting to figure out, is with the special characteristics of a certain instrument, what is the nicest way of actually getting a nice music out of it.
What's your favourite type of things to play on the piano?
Mostly I just sit down and improvise something myself.
Oh, fun. Okay. Like jazz, or just?
Well, probably it's nothing specific, so it's sort of a mixture of everything, and it also develops. It has its own evolution. So my wife tells me that I have a certain style of making some sounds, but I think it has also evolved over the last 20 years. It sounds a bit different now.
Fascinating. Another question about, I guess, your life were there any sports that you used to do when you were a child, or still do?
Yeah, it's a variety actually. So When I was younger, let's put it like that, I used to sail quite a lot, from the dinghy sailing, and play also a bit of squash. Then children came, and then you completely reset your life. So what we're doing then is mostly just to try to figure out what could be interesting for everyone. And mostly running up the hill behind the house.
Yes.
Or going ice skating. What we took up a few years ago, just to make something completely different, is to learn the unicycle. So that's a quite interesting thing again, because you need to learn completely newly learn how to actually sit on a bike. It's coming.
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of falling off at the start as well, so maybe.
No, the interesting thing is you have some sort of instruction manual, and they say it takes about 5-6 hours to not at my age. So 3 years in, and I'm starting to not fall off too much. Do
your kids ride it as well?
Yeah, one of my daughters wants to do it. The other two sort of they don't want to.
Wow, yeah. I think my dad used to ride a unicycle around. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, definitely seemed rather difficult though.
Well, the interesting thing is that you somehow learn how your neurons. I'm too much. You learn how the neurons are working actually in your brain, because at the beginning you have absolutely no equilibrium. You don't feel it, but then somehow the next time you go up, or you just make a break of 2 weeks, you come back up and it works. So you're just noticing how something in your brain has sort of wired up differently, and now all of a sudden you can do that. And then you can try the next thing, and of course you fall down again. But it's this sort of rewiring of your brain that I have actually observed so much with the children when they just came out of the toddler age, and it was never something continuous that you observe with the small children. It's sort of, they can't do it, they try it, and then they know how to do it. And it's not that it's sort of, I know a little bit and it becomes better, but it's sort of always a disruptive learning effect. The interesting thing is with the unicycle, it happens even at our age.
Yeah.
That it's this sort of disruptive thing. It doesn't work at all. You let it away, come back a few days later, and then it works, and you have no idea why. And then you try the next thing, and so that's actually the most interesting thing with this unicycle part. And I wasn't aware that it still works with adults like that.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's it's certainly learning new skills always. It's always quite a fascinating ability that we seem to have. So the next few questions I wanted to ask were we call these our quickfire questions, and they're sort of generally a bit more short questions, although feel free to elaborate wherever you want to. So the first one is, where is your favourite place in St Andrews?
Probably in my office, but it's in St Andrews. I like walking through the town and go into the small shops and buy stuff. But there's nothing really say this must be the one.
This is
I always like the food from Convenico.
Oh yes, very much.
And visit a Roca. Let's put those in and make good advertising for those two.
What do you have a favourite food?
My next one I'm cooking. I think just from I'm baking a lot of bread myself, and probably then you can say the favorite food is the experimental bread that comes out next. It's but otherwise it's nothing specific.
I see. Definitely very interested to hear the answer to this one. What do you have a favourite music genre and a favourite song? I need to give you a very strange answer to that. Perfect.
I prefer music, or I like music, independent on the genre or whatever it is. If I can identify something that I can only say vaguely describe with, it has some character. So it is some sort of, you see that people who perform it really like it, and they have given some thought on it, and they have worked on it, and it comes out as a product that is nicely made. And so that could be from medieval music up to heavy metal. In between, you always find these sort of gems that really stand out and make a really good music.
Is there any particular song?
No.
Comes to mind? What is your favourite genre of book?
I think it's the same answer with music. It's if it has some character in it.
Yeah.
So it could be a nicely written novel. It could be even some pretty dry phone book. It's well, actually, phone books don't exist anymore. But
Right.
we actually used to read some of them. It was quite amusing sometimes, especially when people still were writing professions with it.
Mm.
But I think it's a book is. I got lately a bit in reading the Finnish author Mika Valtari, and there's one thing that probably comes in which hits the style of what is interesting, which is a sort of telling a story because of the sake of the story, not of trying to teach people something.
Mm.
And it's the same with the music. If it's something which just to see that people had fun in producing and did it in such a good way that it's transmitted, then it's a captivating experience. And I think this book is the same.
Yeah, I think I do agree with you there. It's not so much the genre, but the characters and plot involved. If you could, this one this is probably my favourite question I always like asking. If you could change one law of physics, what would it be?
If I change the law of physics, probably the universe collapses.
Yes.
and so I would be very, very reluctant touching any digit in any of those interactions. No, I wouldn't change any.
I see. Don't mess with something that works, I guess. Yeah.
Never touch a working system.
Yes, exactly. Well, that was the last of the quickfire questions then, and so sort of just one final question, which is, I mean, to be fair, we've touched advice quite a few times throughout, but I guess let's say an undergrad and aspiring researcher, do you have any advice for them at that stage as just a young person looking to work in academia in general?
Working in academia or just working in general?
With
both,
your background, I think, yeah, either one works.
Because my recommendation is try to figure out what you really like, and then try to sort of take a sort of guided random walk towards it. What I'm saying is that very often you don't find the dream job you want to have. But if you take something that is close enough, and if you do it well, it will be very interesting. So I would say follow your nose. Don't hesitate to change if you are unhappy or you think something could be more interesting. And wherever you are, try just to make it as interesting as possible. With the background we're giving you in physics, that should be a pretty good background, a pretty good basis for actually being flexible and adjust to many situations. And with physics, we're sort of training people to be all-rounders with a lot of methods. So my recommendation is take those methods and use them for wherever you have fun. There shouldn't be sort of a external pressure of you should do this and this, but just follow your nose.
I think that's definitely a great advice to end on. It's been really great talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Insight, the University of St Andrew's Physics Society's podcast. Thank you to our wonderful interviewees for sharing their thoughts and insights. This podcast was produced by Muse McKennon, Veronica Sedlakova, and Michael Stanway. To find out more about the Physics Society and what we do, find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or search St Andrew's Physics Society for our website. Goodbye.